Stephen King just got his books canceled by a major publishing house, and it's all because he falsely attributed a statement to Charlie Kirk about wanting people dead. Facebook reports that a major publishing house has just canceled his books following a mistake he admits was his own, falsely attributing a statement to Charlie Kirk about wanting violence. This represents the complete destruction of the horror master's relationship with traditional publishing over a social media error that he's taking full responsibility for. The Charlie Kirk false attribution shows how quickly misinformation can destroy decades of author-publisher relationships even when the mistake is acknowledged. This cancellation proves that publishing houses are now prioritizing political safety over literary legacy when authors make controversial errors. The timing shows how social media mistakes can instantly end publishing contracts, regardless of an author's historical success and cultural impact. This case represents the new reality where authors face immediate professional consequences for political missteps. King's admission of fault shows how even legendary authors can't survive publishing house political sensitivities in the current cultural climate.
Meta just got an emergency court ruling to block a whistleblower from promoting her scathing book about Facebook, and it's proving that tech companies will use legal warfare to silence critics. Mashable reports that Meta has been granted an emergency ruling blocking whistleblower and former employee Sarah Wynne Williams from promoting her memoir, Careless People. But this censorship backfired spectacularly as the book is now third on Amazon's bestsellers list. This emergency ruling represents the most aggressive corporate censorship of a critical book in tech industry history. The Careless People title perfectly captures how Meta treats user privacy and employee whistleblowers who expose internal problems. This legal blocking shows how tech giants use court systems to prevent former employees from sharing insider knowledge about corporate misconduct. The Amazon bestseller success proves that corporate censorship creates massive public interest and sales for banned books. This case represents the Streisand effect, where attempts to silence criticism create more attention and credibility for the censored content. The whistleblower memoir genre is becoming the most dangerous threat to tech company reputations.
Delaware just banned book bans based on ideological objections, and it's the most important anti-censorship legislation of 2024 that could save school libraries nationwide. WHYY reports that Delaware bans book bans based on ideological objections, with the new law creating a statewide process that school boards and communities must follow when someone wants books taken off library shelves. This legislation represents the first comprehensive state-level protection against ideological book removal that prioritizes educational value over political pressure. The statewide process requirement proves that Delaware is creating bureaucratic barriers to prevent emotional book challenges from succeeding without proper justification. This law shows how blue states are fighting back against the red state book banning movement with legislative protections for intellectual freedom. The ideological objections focus proves that Delaware recognizes that most book challenges are politically motivated rather than educationally justified. This represents the evolution of anti-censorship activism, from reactive protests to proactive legislative protection. The timing shows how states are racing to protect school libraries before more books disappear from educational settings.
West Point is getting sued for banning faculty speech and books, and is proving that military academies have become authoritarian institutions that crush academic freedom. Masslowers Weekly reports that law professor Tim Bakken sues West Point, alleging bans on faculty speech, books, and courses violate the First Amendment and academic freedom. This lawsuit represents the most serious challenge to military academy censorship, where even law professors can't discuss controversial topics without facing institutional retaliation. The faculty speech ban proves that West Point has abandoned its educational mission in favor of political conformity that silences dissenting academic voices. This case shows how military institutions use their authority to suppress academic inquiry that challenges institutional narratives or policies. The books and courses ban proves that West Point is creating an intellectually sterile environment where critical thinking is discouraged rather than developed. This lawsuit represents the intersection of military authority and academic freedom, where constitutional rights clash with institutional control. The First Amendment challenge shows how military academies may be violating basic constitutional protections in their zeal to control faculty expression.
Blue Stockings bookstore workers are clashing with owners over the store's closure, and it's exposing how independent bookstores are collapsing while exploiting their own employees. Publishers Weekly reports that the closure soon drew controversy, with two of the store's worker stewards, Jay Gandhi and the Vinay Murthy, alleging on social media that the decision to close was made without proper worker consultation. This worker-owner conflict represents the complete breakdown of the cooperative bookstore model, where employees expected democratic participation in major business decisions. The worker steward's title proves that Blue Stockings operated under a progressive management structure that was abandoned when financial pressures mounted. This controversy shows how independent bookstores that promote social justice values often fail to practice those values when dealing with their own employees. The social media allegations prove that bookstore workers are using public platforms to expose management hypocrisy and demand accountability. This case represents the death of the idealistic independent bookstore, where progressive politics clash with capitalist business realities. The closure controversy shows how even activist bookstores prioritize owner interests over worker rights when facing financial crisis. Microsoft just announced they'll pay publishers for AI content, and it's the first major tech company to admit that artificial intelligence has been stealing from writers this whole time. Security Online reports that Microsoft is reportedly building a pilot program to pay publishers when their content is used by its AI, signaling a new path for content monetization in the age of artificial intelligence. This payment program represents the first admission by a major tech company that AI training has been using copyrighted content without compensation or permission. The pilot program structure proves that Microsoft is testing whether paying for content can prevent the massive copyright lawsuits that are threatening the entire AI industry. This monetization path shows how tech companies are scrambling to create legal frameworks for AI content use before courts force them to pay massive damages. The publisher focus proves that Microsoft recognizes that news organizations and book publishers have the strongest legal cases against AI content theft. This represents the evolution of AI ethics, where tech companies move from taking content freely to paying for legitimate access.
A new documentary called The Librarians is exposing the heroic women battling book bans in red states, and it's proving that librarians have become the most important freedom fighters in America. The Guardian reports that this excellent Culture Wars documentary tells the story of book banning in red states, such as Florida and Texas, where religious right-wingers are crusading against intellectual freedom in public libraries. This documentary represents the elevation of librarians from quiet book organizers to frontline warriors in the battle for intellectual freedom and democratic values. The heroic women focus proves that the anti-censorship movement is led by female librarians who risk their careers to protect reading rights. This Culture Wars framing shows how book banning has become a central battleground in American political polarization, where libraries represent democratic values. The Florida and Texas focus proves that red state book banning has become systematic government censorship rather than isolated community complaints. This documentary represents the media recognition that librarians deserve for defending constitutional rights against authoritarian attacks. The religious right-wing identification shows how book banning is driven by theocratic rather than educational motivations.
House Democrats just introduced legislation to restore books that Trump removed from military schools, and it's proving that book banning has infected even our armed forces education. Washington Examiner reports that 2 House Democrats introduced legislation to restore books at Department of Defense schools that were removed by the Trump administration, representing a direct political battle over military educational content. This legislation represents the politicization of military education, where even Defense Department schools face ideological book removal based on presidential politics rather than educational merit. The Trump administration removal proves that book banning reached the highest levels of government, where military families' children faced censorship of educational materials. This restoration effort shows how Democratic politicians are using legislative power to reverse Republican censorship policies that targeted military school libraries. The Department of Defense focus proves that book banning has become a national security issue when military families can't access diverse educational content. This case represents the intersection of military policy and educational freedom, where political ideology determines what military children can read. The legislative response shows how book banning has become a partisan political issue.
An unpublished Raymond Chandler short story is about to appear in a literary magazine, and it's proving that even dead authors can still surprise us with new masterpieces. The Guardian Culture section mentions that an unpublished Raymond Chandler short story will appear in a literary magazine, representing a major literary discovery that could reshape understanding of the noir master's work. This unpublished story represents the holy grail of literary discoveries, where new work from canonical authors emerges decades after their death. The literary magazine publication proves that small publications still play crucial roles in bringing important literary discoveries to public attention. This Chandler discovery shows how literary estates continue to uncover hidden treasures in author archives that expand our understanding of major writers. The timing proves that literary archaeology continues to yield important finds that can change scholarly understanding of established authors. This represents the excitement of literary discovery, where new work from beloved authors creates renewed interest in their entire body of work. This short story format proves that even minor discoveries from major authors can generate significant literary and cultural attention.